you were talking about Manny Pacquiao, and he's a great fighter, legendary. And then I brought up the topic of like, hey, I'm pretty sure he practiced semen retention to kind of show up his best version of himself. So we talked about that. We trickled down, and now you're kind of talking about more of a meta perspective on
it's
cultural environment.
It's, there's a spiritual component to this. And abstinence is not just for people who are not married, but it can also be practiced by married people for the purposes of disciplining the body. Let's just come from that framework where it's difficult because society is hypersexualized and nurtured for instant gratification of every kind. And I use the example of Amazon same-day delivery. I mean, 10 years ago when we got like 2-day delivery, it was like a thing. The next day delivery, now same day. And so what we're used to is constant pleasure. And the whole world is acting on your dopamine receptors.
Yeah. Yep.
In every way.
Mm-hmm.
Because like when you go to make a purchase and now you can get it in 4 hours, dopamine. And there's a huge component about that sexually.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when life is done, we talk about all the things, right? I see this template as why I love this podcast. I'm just looking backwards now.
Yeah.
50 years on my deathbed of all the things I'm not going to have cared about. That's the purpose of this podcast, is to hopefully give viewers and followers multiple different pathways to maximizing their potential while we're here on this earth.
Yep.
And one of the many things that no man, I don't believe, will look back on his deathbed and say, man, I wish I had more sex. Like we've already well established, no one's ever going to look back and say, man, I wish I would have worked more.
Yeah.
Wish I would have spent more hours at the office. Like no one says that. And so if that's true and we can work backwards to try to find a balance, why is it wrong to say the same about sex?
Sure.
And it is important. It does have a function relationally and otherwise, but specifically, why are we so focused on that as a society?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think society does a great job at hypersexualizing everything. I mean, your tablet, like anything that exists in a marketplace. And so that doesn't help because we just see it everywhere. But there's a massive, massive benefit and potential, aesthetically and otherwise, to bringing the body into subjection and disciplining your desires, all desires. We talk a lot about disciplining your thoughts and disciplining your mind. And sex is the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no different. And I guess the question is, how do we remove it from the forefront when society just places it front and center?
That's a great frame and a question. It reminds me of the lack of rite of passages in our modern day. So what happens is traditionally, right, rites of passages were tribal by nature. Now it's shifted to be more individual. You just got to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
And so we enter the marketplace or the modern world, and there hasn't been any disciplining of the mind or body going up against a tidal wave of dopamine-driven, hypersexual advertising, marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And so on one hand, I'm like, well, what do you expect? When there's been no training up to this point and you interface with a world that is, or pulls the lever on sex sells, and it does.
And I think that's the key. Sex does sell. Why? I don't even know like the answer. Like research-wise, you probably know better than me, but is it because of the dopamine? Is it because of just our carnal like base?
This is a subjective response, but number one, it's easy because people aren't disciplined. It's easy to sell with sex.
Say it again. Say it again, because there's a lot of truth there.
It's easy to sell with sex.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the fact most of us aren't disciplined or disciplined of the body, then it's just kind of like a compounding effect. Like we just keep feeding into that because it's easy to sell. And so where I'm going with this is like, at some point, even if it's just you as an individual, I think taking back the agency of yourself rather than blaming the system.
I think what you just said, I want to focus on that word agency.
Right. And I want to like make sure that you and I and everyone who may watch is like, it's actually possible to be disciplined in this manner and like have virtue around your body in a way that is honorable, but also doesn't suppress it.
Sure.
It's a tall order, but it's possible.
What I love is the overarching theme is that you're in charge, agency of your thoughts and your desires. And that's the thing we need to get back to telling young men, middle-aged men. It's like you are fully responsible for your thoughts and how you act on them and for your desires.
These are divergent thoughts again, but maybe you can help me thread them. Testosterone is like at an all-time low or very low, like generally with men in America from what I see. But there's also like the quick pleasure problem, you know, porn, ejaculation, all that stuff. And at the same time, we have this other camp that's saying we need to ramp up testosterone. We need more men. And so it's like, I wrote this line the other day. It says, you know, we're easily pleasured by life, but we're at the same time deeply discontented with it.
Sure.
Easily pleasured, but also discontented with it at the same time. And I think this is one of those topics or sectors that feed into that because it's so easy just to go to that as a mechanism or an escape or a distraction. And it's like never ending. You can rely on that cycle.
I think where it gets dicey, it's like, so if you look at 2,000 years ago, the curve is probably generally the same. You know, testosterone peaks and then it starts stopping.
Yep.
That's the circle of life, right? That's just the natural progression. And so I think the problem is as a society, we always want better, faster, stronger. And that's like generally good. And so we try to augment the natural cycle to get it to last longer, a little faster. And I think that's where we start tweaking God's plan a little.
Sure.
In general.
Yeah.
Because the natural plan is that there's a peak and then it tapers. It's been like that since the dawn of mankind.
Sure.
Whether we've, quantified it or not. And so why are we trying to augment that? Yes, testosterone boosts performance and cognitive function for sure. And there's many testosterone-related deficiencies that we need to solve for. But why are we trying to give, I'm not saying this is the case, but this is what I perceive it to be. Why are we trying to give, 75-year-old men the testosterone of a 25-year-old?
Sure.
People are like, what are we trying to accomplish here? And so I think the goal should not always be better, faster, stronger.
Be wiser.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so like better on a qualitative playing field.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, what are we trying to make better, faster, stronger? If it's just the physical,
it's short-sighted.
And if it's not the emotional and the spiritual, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, going back to that, a lot of cultures around the world have universally favored deep wisdom, discipline. Yeah. Some of these things as like, this is what we should be spending our entire life acquiring. And so if you go into that camp, you immediately become more difficult to sell to.
Yeah.
In terms of sex.
Right.
Right. Because sex doesn't sell with the person that understands that sex is carnal and fleeting. Generally, right? Yeah. So I think as we get older, like that's kind of direction that we want to go.
Sure.
Where I'm not just being led by my flesh.
Yeah. Yeah. What you brought up with like essentially asking, well, why? Why are we trying to get 60-year-olds to have T levels of a 30 or whatever? I think it's a great question. And it reminds me of, I'm forgetting where this professor is, but I watched a clip of him. He said, and he's talking about testosterone and the craze about it right now. He's like, we're doing this all wrong. We're trying to biohack and optimize our way to higher T levels. To what aim?
Right.
And
so I didn't even know. I figured someone in the scientific community is asking these questions.
Right.
But I mean, great.
And he follows it up with this. He was like, look, if right now you are an asshole and you're lying, stealing, and cheating every day, and your T levels go up by 400 points or 600 points, you're going to be more of an asshole, lying, stealing, cheating more. However, if we raise T levels of monks in Tibet, guess what's going to happen? They're going to be more loving, more kind, more generous. So T levels actually amplify what you already are.
I love that. This is along the same vein of it. It's like money.
Mm-hmm.
Money just amplifies what you already are.
Sure.
If you're a bad person,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
If you're just a greedy, selfish, if that's your base, more money is just going to make you more of those things. You're not going to wake up and be philanthropic,
yeah,
because you now have more money,
right?
But if you're kind, if you're gentle, if you're wise, if these are the things that even at the core, like the core is what matters.
Yep.
Money amplifies that. You know, money makes good people better resources.
Yep.
Money allows giving people to give more.
Yeah.
And so I get what you're saying. It's kind of like, you know, it's not just a performance enhancer. We're talking about the testosterone now. It's like, what are we enhancing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
mean, it comes back down to that. I think, you know, the discipline part of like, if you get to a point where you're thinking about TRT or T-level enhancement,
barring the medical necessities,
absolutely,
of course, because there are some, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about
outside of like sanctioned medical advice,
right.
You got the guys on X or Instagram who are like trying everything under the sun to get to like 1,000 T levels at any cost. It's like it feels short-sighted, and at the same time, I do believe taking care of yourself is important. So it's like a nuanced thing, right? Like I think most people know, like if you're just trying to enhance and optimize at any cost, there's still going to be some gaps.
Yeah, it just goes back to like, what are we enhancing?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'd want to see myself with elevated testosterone. that guy was a problem.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's actually just like caffeine. I'm trying to consume less caffeine, more caffeine.
Yep.
But like, what's the core that we're telling men? That's not going to fix anything.
Yeah.
That's not going to fix the stuff that needs to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that needs to be fixed is up here.
Yeah.
And in here.
Yeah.
And even some of the really like aggressive influencers, I think of like David Goggins, because he's abrasive. I love it. It doesn't bother me.
Carry the boats.
But a lot of that is mental. It's like a mental toughness.
Yeah.
And dare I say, spiritual. And I don't know anything about him. I've never even heard him speak about that perspective. But there's a discipline in there that exceeds and I think overwhelms the physical.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, and just to be fair too, there's a lot of good research and findings that increasing T levels when medically sanctioned improves mental health and physical and gets you on a trajectory that is wiser. But
absolutely,
having said that, I think as a whole, this whole pocket or this whole movement, it has to be examined a little bit. And like you said earlier, it's like, at what aim?
I think the bottom line is we need to be trying to enhance our spiritual, mental, and emotional states.
Yep.
There's a physical component that's incredibly important.
Yep.
Generally taking care of the body and some movement. But I think society gravitates towards the physical only. And I think that's a problem.